And I'll let her introduce herself.
All right, everybody, I'm Natalia Hussey-Burdick. I'm the state representative for Kailua Kaneohe Bay. Should we just roll into the slides now?
Okay, let me do that. Okay, so this is the presentation we're gonna have. Okay, so I will have, let me go take this out and bring the other one out.
And while he's doing that, I just want to thank everybody so much for being here. I've been a Kailua CERT member for almost a year now, and I've seen the meetings grow and grow and grow almost every time. And to have our first responders here joining us to build those relationships and work together towards emergency management and disaster preparedness, I just really can't thank you enough for being here. Thank you so much.
Okay, and you can use this to move the
Oh,
slide.
that's super helpful. Does this have a
Okay.
laser too?
What's that?
Does this have a laser too?
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right, everybody. So this is my contact information. I've also got some newsletters in the back if you want to take a look. I'm a proud member of the Kailua Community Emergency Response Team. That's me with my graduating class. Some of you are here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the bills today that are going through the legislature. We have a lot of disaster preparedness bills. In particular, one of my favorite ones is actually a bill that I wrote, and it was based off of Puerto Rico had a similar law that they introduced in the 90s after they had a really bad hurricane then, and it has really helped them deal with all the storms since then. And as we all know, they got hit really bad by Hurricane Maria, but they would have been in so much worse shape if they didn't have, I don't think theirs are Cat 5, I think theirs are Cat 3 or higher. All public buildings have to be Cat 3 or higher. So basically what these are two companion bills. The House version has stalled, it didn't get a hearing, but the Senate version did pass its first committee, thanks in part to some of your awesome testimony. Thank you so much to everybody who could testify. So it went through the first committee, and then it needs to pass its second committee by March 1st. So right now it's in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. They're thinking about how much it's gonna cost the state, and it's really important for members of the community to reach out and let them know that this is an issue that we wanna prioritize and spend that money up front so that we're not paying for it later on the back end. A similar bill, there's actually a set of companion carryover bills from last year. This is a tax credit that we give, the proposed tax credit for homeowners who retrofit their own home to include any kind of wind resistive devices. We would give you a refund on your tax, or not a refund, it's a non-refundable, but it's a tax credit on your tax break. This is also stalled in the same place, so that same Ways and Means Committee, it would be great if they could hear from you all to know how important you think this issue is. There are over 150 bills dealing with emergencies, emergency management. I'll go through them briefly. So a lot of these are still alive. I kind of tried to focus on the ones that I thought you would be the most interested in. There's a distribution management working group. That was actually one of our recommendations. From the House created a bunch of committees after the wildfires and said, how can we do this better? How can we improve the response? And so they really want a distribution supply management working group to bring everybody out to the table. Haima stockpile supply warehouse, so funding to create a warehouse, then fill it with supplies.
What kind of supplies?
Any medical, food, just emergency supplies. And then there's several bills relating to alternative egress routes, and this is something that we really need to keep in mind as we plan communities. It's a shame how many communities have been built that only have one way in and one way out. And so these bills are all focused on different communities. One of those bills died, but 3 of them are still alive for now. And I just want to emphasize that at the legislature, while it may be alive for now, it may not be alive next week. So if these bills matter to you, it's really important to call your legislators, call the committee chairs, and make sure they know how important these bills are. They found during the Maui wildfires that a lot of people don't speak English, and they need to get emergency information out to them. So there's a couple of bills about having a language access coordinator in Haima. There's a couple bills for Resilience Hub funding, several bills, actually this one passed last year. So this is some good news to get a voting member of Haima on the Building Code Council, which is great because the Building Code Council mostly is made up of people in the construction industry, and they're just trying to build as fast and as cheap as possible. And then, so having this person from HAIMA to be that voice to say, no, we actually do need a way in and a way out of every community. We need hurricane-resistant materials. We need fireproof plans. It's really important to have their voice there, and so I'm glad that we passed that last year. There's a statewide hazard mapping app. That bill didn't make it. There's another bill that didn't make it I thought was interesting, having different siren sounds for different emergencies. So maybe like different sounds for tsunami versus hurricane versus wildfire. There were over 60 wildfire prevention bills, 11 of which were bills to institute a state fire marshal in some form or another. 2 of those bills are still alive. We've got 1 House bill and 1 Senate bill. And I do think that'll pass this year. We're the only state that doesn't have a fire marshal. And it is really important to help with fire code enforcement, as we have somebody here for. Couple of bills for the Wildfire Relief Fund, couple of bills for DLNR funding for wildfire management, and specifically for the Maui wildfire reliefs. There's an interesting bill utilizing AI to create a wildfire forecast system, and a similar bill about wildfire risk mapping, but that one's not AI. There's a bill that did not pass. This one didn't ever get a hearing about requiring all new power lines to be underground. Yeah, I see we have some fans of that in this group. And there's a wildfire mitigation working group. I just want to briefly touch on the budget. The budget is a really complex process. Basically, it's all in the budget bill, which this year is number HB 1800. This is what I'm about to mention are specifically line items that are in the House version of the budget. This is what we call the base budget. It's the governor's budget funding request. And then that's gonna change. So it hasn't had its Finance Committee hearing yet in the House Finance Committee. The House Finance Committee is gonna add and remove things, and then they're gonna pass it over to the Senate, who's also gonna add and remove things. And then they're gonna go through what's called Conference Committee, and they're gonna make some final changes. But for right now, this is what's in the budget. So we've got $3 million for hurricane shelter retrofitting, which is really great because last year we passed, I think it was only $750,000 for the whole state for retrofitting, which I think can do like maybe one school. But this would be really great because all of our schools on the windward side, we used to have 8 hurricane shelters that were rated, I think, Cat 3, but they've all been reevaluated since then and downgraded, so they're not even Cat 3 hurricane shelters.
We don't have any now.
We don't have any on the windward side.
So hopefully that part of the $3 million can help retrofit
Yeah.
maybe Kalaheo High School,
Yeah.
Kailua High School.
And then so we've got, so this is it's kind of hard to see like all these different line items in the budget, and there's different methods of funding, like A funds or general funds, P funds or federal funds. And so basically what we've done here with this cross through, they were initially proposed to have $22 million. And then this year they're crossing that out and they're changing that to $46 million. So they're almost doubling the amount of federal funding that we're giving to Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. And then there's $360,000 for West Maui wildfire suppression, including some water tanks that they can use in the event of an emergency. I briefly want to mention the risk that's right in our backyard, Kalaheo Hillside. It's all owned by Alexander and Baldwin, and so I've been in discussions with them since the wildfires in August. They're kind of constantly insisting that they're doing all they can. I'm asking for more details and insisting they can always do more, but basically they're doing monthly drone inspections. They had a site visit back in November. They've hired a landscaper to clear overgrowth, and they have cut some 30-foot fire breaks behind some people's houses. They still have a long ways left to go, but at least that work has started. And they've been meeting with the fire battalion chief to improve a maintenance program for that area, and I'm working on getting as many details as possible. And as some of our Kaimolino residents may know, there was a house fire on February 18th, last Sunday. And this is an important detail that I think everybody needs to know about. It was caused by an e-bike battery exploding. They said that they had 7 e-bikes in their garage. 7 e-bikes in their garage. And they said that when the first responders came, they said they recognized it exactly. They said this is not the first time that an e-bike battery has exploded. So I think we need to be very wary of e-bikes. Maybe don't leave them charging unattended. Maybe keep them outside so they're not like inside of a garage leading to a house fire. And we may need some more regulations. So this is something I'm going to be looking closely at in the interim and seeing if there's any kind of legislation I can pass for next year. Oh, and I wouldn't be your representative if I didn't remind you that there is a natural disaster unfolding very slowly in front of our eyes. So these are little fire ant infestations. They burn like a bee sting and they hurt for 3 days and they make pets' eyes, they eat pets' eyes and they make them go blind. And we can stop this if we test. So I have some little fire ant test kits in the back. There were 10 little fire ant bills this year. And it has a stamped envelope in the back, so mail in your tests. You can find more information at stoptheant.org. But please, everybody, go home and test your house tonight. And that's all I have for you. Sorry to take so long.
We'll have 15 minutes for questions after all the presentations are made.
Yeah.
So let me pull this one out and get the next one ready. Oh, let's see, where's that? Oh, I gotta close it out. Okay. Okay. Let me see that again. Okay. Check. Okay, there we go. And let me put the next one in. And which one is the download? Not showing up. Let me try this one here. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, and you have that.
Okay, so again, my name is Jennifer Walter. I work at the Department of Emergency Management. I'm going to talk just really quickly about what we are, and then I was going to provide some updates on some key things that I thought might be of interest to you all. One of which is sheltering, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit. I heard some things that maybe I can help clarify and give some more information on the shelter program. So we're a really small agency. When we're fully staffed, there's about 15 of us, and if you start pulling off our administrative staff or our grants people, there's not a lot of program people. That's the way most emergency management agencies are, because we're not the responders to every disaster. We're really behind the scenes trying to coordinate, figure out what the needs are, making sure the first responders on scene have access to what they might need from other city departments. And so we really are conveners and coordinators. I call us cat herders. And we're kind of like the orchestra conductors. Like, everybody brings their own instruments. We try to get everybody to play along to the same sheet of music when there's a lot of chaos. And so that's a little bit about us. So we don't have a lot of stuff. We don't have a lot of people, but we're trying to network plans and people together. So one of the things I want to talk tonight about was shelters. And there's a lot of confusion over what we mean when we say shelters and the different types of shelters. So we classify shelters kind of into 3 different buckets. One is hurricane refuge areas, and these are facilities that are going to be opened as a storm is approaching for evacuation purposes, just a safe place to ride out the storm. And I'll talk about why we call them refuge areas in a minute. But these have to have a higher level of protection from the elements than buildings we might use for a brush fire, for example. And so over the years, as different facilities have been looked at, most of the ones that provide the adequate protection are in public schools. For most other events, we try to stay out of public schools. Schools don't want us there. They don't want the disruption. Post-event, they want the kids to get back in session. So this is really the only scenario, for the most part, with a few exceptions where we don't have a lot of other options, that we use the public schools. So a lot of times people say the school's the shelter, and it is, but for one kind of event. Other events that we mostly try to use on short notice, facilities that we as a city have quick access to, that we can say, yes, use that. And most of those are parks and rec facilities. We try, you'll see at the bottom, a little bit more space, because in a hurricane evacuation, we don't have a lot of safe space. We try to cram everybody in. But we try to use parks and rec. If there was a church or another private facility available, we might use that if we could get it on really short notice. But again, it's supposed to be a safe place to stay until the threat has passed, people can go home. Post-impact sheltering is another area of concern. We get fixated on the evacuation phase a lot, but post-impact, if that storm came and knocked down everybody's home, we don't have a lot of big facilities with large meeting rooms that are just sitting empty for us to use. And that's the idea of a post-impact shelter. Whatever that hazard was that made you evacuate is now destroyed your home or you can't get back. And so it's really supposed to be a longer-term place to stay until some other type of shelter. In Maui, it happened to be hotels. It could be some other kind of temporary facility opens up to get that transition started back to normal. So I'll talk about some existing plans. So we have all of these buildings, whether it's parks and rec, some private facilities, a lot of public schools, classified by what hazard maybe they'd be good for. And we have them designated in order of priority. Our top priority, if a flood happens, here's our top flood evacuation or a top hurricane evacuation. And then when it's needed, we make sure the facility is available and we announce it to the public. And that's a big thing. A lot of people want a list of where exactly do I go. And the problem is that depending on the time of year, the type of event, it might not be available. Remember what I said earlier about schools, they don't want us there when school's in session. We had an event last year where our parks and rec sites, because it was summer break, weren't really available because summer fun was going on. But guess what was available? The schools, because there weren't any kids there. So if we pre-publish a list and get people very fixated on something, it's not always the best alternative in an emergency. So that's why we maintain a little bit of flexibility in terms of what we put out, because we don't have control to a lot of the facilities available. So I get this question a lot. How many shelters do you have? How many people can you accommodate in those shelters? And I say that's really a kind of a tricky question for me to answer. I always sound like I'm dodging it, but it's what kind of shelter are you talking about? Is it a hurricane refuge area where we're only giving 10 square feet per person? Or am I using that same exact facility for post-impact sheltering where now it's 40 square feet per person? And maybe some of the classroom buildings I'm using in a hurricane because they're safe, I don't want to use for post-impact. So it's a complicated question, and so it really depends on what kind you're talking about. So I want to talk about some of the things we've been working on. One of the things was to build a database of all these facilities. When I started at DM a couple years ago, we had a lot of Excel spreadsheets. We did not have a live system that is designated exactly what facility could be done for what and what it was good for and what the capacity was. So we have that now, and our next hope is that when we start having events, we can show in real time for every hazard, not just hurricane, what's open, where it is. The other thing that we did is, I heard someone say earlier that before we had this many hurricane shelters, and now we only have this many. The reality is that there was never any hurricane-rated shelters. In the mid-90s, most of our progress around hurricane sheltering has been related to a big storm happening, usually on the mainland, sometimes here. So after Iniki, there was a big push to get more space. After Katrina, there was a big push to get more space. So the first one was in the 90s after Iniki. And if you read the report, a bunch of engineers looked at every facility they could, all the parks, all the schools, a lot of churches, and they concluded if they really put wind standards against all of these buildings, they would basically have no shelters. So they rated them in terms of how risky it was, but it was for a Category 1 storm that would brush Oahu. So these weren't facilities that were structurally assessed by an engineer or constructed to a certain standard. So in 2005, after Katrina, the state got nervous again and said, what are we doing with these shelters again? We really need to make sure there's some engineering standards and we get out of this. So they passed some new standards and there's some new criteria to rate these shelters. The problem is that each building, and a school is many buildings, and that's the thing when we talk about retrofits, we say the school's retrofitted. No, it's usually one building of many at the school. It costs about $20,000 to do just that engineering assessment. So none of these, when they passed the new standards, were actually reassessed. There are just too many buildings. And I can tell you almost every engineering assessment I have ever read says, yep, this doesn't meet what we said is the hurricane standard. You guys have to do retrofits, which is usually, we heard earlier, there's not the budget, it's a many-year project. So what we had was a bunch of stuff from the mid-90s, very few retrofits, some are done. Kahuku Elementary has a retrofitted facility. And I don't know what they are. Are they old standard, new standard? And so what the city did, and this was just the city, because we knew this, we had heard about something Puerto Rico used called Best Available Refuge Area. So it was a tool that they had developed for when you didn't have enough built or hardened facilities to evaluate, kind of like they did in the mid-90s, what is the least risk if I put people here? Maybe the building will sustain a little bit of damage, but it's least likely to fail and kill people. And so during COVID, we used some of the funding to develop the tool for Oahu, complete with wind modeling. Engineers came out and looked at our building types and did a bunch of buildings. And we could only do so many, but we got about 38 potential sites. Now within those sites, that's many, many different buildings. And so there are 5 on the windward side, and we have a kind of a priority list of which we would open these. These are publicly available on the website. You would just have to look just in time to see what's actually opened. The problem is this revealed some shelter deserts. It looks like we didn't do a very good job looking all over the island, but the reality is a lot of places we looked, the buildings didn't pass the bar rating. They were recommended by the engineers that looked at it not to use it. The North Shore is a shelter desert, Kailua is a shelter desert. There's a bunch of areas. So our goal was 20% of the population that could be accommodated in 10 square feet per person. We're at about 10% of the population. So one of our priorities is to do additional bar assessments, with the idea being that we're going to try to identify other facilities and areas where we have a lack of capacity. Everywhere does, but there's certain ones that have more than others. And we're going to try to also see if there's any private facilities available, that if we could assess, they might be willing to enter into a shelter agreement to use that facility, which would expand it a little bit, because unfortunately the schools just don't have a lot of that capacity. We are also doing full engineering assessments of, we hope it will be 10 city parks with the grant funding we have, in preparation for potentially submitting future grant funding to retrofit those facilities, depending on what the engineering assessment comes back as. But it is a whole lot more expensive to retrofit than it is to build. So one of the things that we're looking at now is it's in progress. We're doing site visits to all of these shelters. And I just want you guys to understand how complex this is. So this is one school. All of these red and green are the individual buildings where the engineer said use or don't use. So we really need people when they go into this shelter to understand where they should put people and where they should not put people, because the not use is a dangerous place to be in the storm. But it's even more complicated than that, because if I were looking at this, where do I want my shelter? If I'm the police officer, right, I'm probably looking for a big open area. I can keep an eye on everybody. Almost all of the buildings and areas of the school that were rated safe are classrooms. So if I look at this, I see, oh, there's this nice gym. Let me put people in the gym. Everything else is classroom. Oh, great, I got a gym finally. It's very rare to get a gym or a cafeteria. This is a little bit hard to see, but within each building, the bar assessment gives it a score. So classroom buildings, 180, 180, 191, pretty good scores in terms of what we have. The gym, 86. So it's very complicated to figure out. We have to be real clear on what we use first, what we use second, because it might sound like a great building for sheltering, but in terms of the risk assessment, it's riskier. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to do these site plans and also look at disability and access and functional needs, so that we're not pointing everybody into an area of the building they can't get to. So a lot of information, but I just want you guys to understand a little bit about the complexity of trying to deal with this problem. A few other things, and I'll go through these quickly. We have been trying to make efforts to put a little bit more of supplies at the shelter and also staffing the shelters. One of the things that we've done is we work with homeless providers through Partners in Care. They also help provide some staff to the shelters. But I will tell you today, the biggest gap is not the number of buildings right now. If you could give us another 20 hurricane refuge areas, we do not have the staff to staff them. So partnering with organizations like the Red Cross, who's our lead shelter partner, they do all the intake for us, and they do agencies with partner groups would be great. We have been focusing on training our city workers and making sure that they're ready to go, but it's not enough. And we haven't gotten support from the state agencies involved, and so we're really trying to make sure that Red Cross is able to recruit people to support the shelters. We've done a lot of work with the Humane Society to increase pet sheltering. We actually just did a big training with them the day before Maui happened. And we're also trying to increase some of the supplies, and I want to set expectations, but one of the big issues that we've had is, especially the homeless coming, we say be prepared for 14 days and they show up with nothing. If you're a shelter manager, that's a very uncomfortable place to be when you have kids that don't have food, especially if school is off. So last year, for the first time, we were able to stage in 25 shelters some emergency supplies to be in the back specifically for the shelter teams to pull out. And so we're going to do it again this year. So we're trying to do a little bit of forward planning like that in the facilities. For feeding, one of the active areas I'll just say is some feeding planning that we're doing. We're working mostly with Food Bank. One of the things we have is some grant funding for a pilot program called Pre-Covery Pods. And this is something where we are working with Food Bank to place containers with shelf-stable meals in areas that are likely to be geographically isolated, where one of their people with a feeding program that serves economically, disadvantaged, food insecure communities can push it out through that same group. So we're not doing a public distribution because they're not likely to have 14 days of supplies. So we have 3 of these so far, and we have funding for 2 more that we're working on placing. And then finally, a couple things I wanted to just talk about on outreach, so I'm taking so much time. One thing is we've updated some guidance on go bags. So we've always done 2 weeks, but we realized after Maui, people really need something they can grab on their way out the door. And so now there's some guidance, especially for those of you who are doing outreach, of what a go bag looks like. One thing that might be of interest to you, we also have an online request form under the Contact Us page at DEM. But the other thing that we're allowing, so you can request a speaker like me to come to an event or someone better than me, but we're also allowing, if you have a community event that you don't need us, like your CERT meetings, you can ask that it be posted on our public calendar now. So there's a link where you can specify whether you just want to post and don't need us there, or you're actually asking us. The tsunami signs that you all have seen around, and then we're going to be doing some stuff for Tsunami Awareness Month. So I just wanted to thank you all for your advocacy of the tsunami signs, because your community was a big push in getting that done. Then there's a bunch of planning going on that you may hear about. I wanted to give you kind of the full picture of what we're looking at. There's several major plans going on. We heard a little bit about the state legislature wildfire working group. The mayor also has one at the city, so a lot of agencies coming together to kind of look at what we need to do at the city level around wildfire response and mitigation. So sorry, that's a lot of information in a short time. Hopefully I didn't go too far over, but thank you.
Let me get this out. And let me pull up the. Let's see. you have PowerPoint? Oh, okay. So let me get back to here. Okay, and, okay, so now we have Honolulu Fire Department giving a presentation.
So I'd like to thank Jennifer from DEM. She actually covered everything I was going to cover, so. So I'm actually going to cover some preparedness from our standpoint and what we would teach. Sorry, I'm going to look at my notes. So each person's needs and abilities are unique, right? So we all have to plan differently. With careful planning, anyone can prepare for an emergency. A disaster can occur anytime, anywhere, and without notice, right? We all know that. So, when is hurricane season? Start to end?
Come on, sir, train people.
Good, yeah, and you guys are supposed to know that answer. Okay, so, along with hurricanes, we also have tornadoes, right? Remember there was a tornado that went between the Mokes and it hit land? And so that's another one. Luckily that doesn't happen a lot, we don't know how that. So what comes with that is high winds. So I've been stationed at Kailua Station for about 6 years at one point in my career. And a lot of the days that was really windy, we had blown roofs, we had trees coming down. It actually cut off the roads, right? So we had to be able to clear it and make sure there's no hazard that would affect people, because if it comes down on power lines, that could cause fires. Luckily that was avoided. Other things that we need to take interest in along this coastline is tsunamis, right? A lot of our areas is low in the flood zone. So flooding when it rains hard. Earthquakes, we just had one, was it last week? I didn't feel it, but people were saying that they felt it. And then of course fires. That fire that actually started on February 18th, yes, it was, I believe, from an e-bike. So that doesn't stop at e-bikes, right? What else is electric that we use? We got cars. We got everything, right? So we got scooters, we got cell phones, everything. So what's in there is called lithium batteries. Tomorrow, one of my co-workers is going to do an interview with KHON2. So if you guys have time, watch the evening news. I think he'll give you a lot of information on that. All right, so the best thing to be prepared is what? Have a plan, yeah? So, in my notes it says 7 days, DEM says 14. So, what do you have to plan for? Don't forget your medications, right? What's important with that? Doctor's visits, your last doctor, change in medications. So you have to take note of that. And remember, if an emergency happens and things are shut down, you might not have access to the hospital, you might not have access to the pharmacies, and you might not have access to stores, gas stations, so you need to prepare for that. And then what about the resources that we use daily? What if it got taken away? What if all your phones got taken away? What would you do? Everybody would be like going crazy, right? So yeah, take note of that. Write down the information in somewhere else where you can get it. It's going to be pen and paper. Jennifer mentioned go bag, so that's something that you may want to keep in that go bag. Another thing you might want to do is identify the local shelters. How about family and friends? If your house is not inhabitable and they live in another part of the island and they're safe, would you be able to go there? If you have pets, you need to plan for them. Don't forget your pets, they are our family members. Another one is create a support group, right? Family, friends. How about your neighbors? Do you know your neighbors? They're right next door to you. If a disaster happens, if something happens to you, they know what you need. You tell them, right? So you mingle with them. Okay, so I have a part-time walking, or I need to take this medication every day. So have that information ready. If your neighbor goes down and you know that information, if someone comes, they may have resources to help that person out. Let's see. Oh, and then have an emergency plan and share it with your support group. It's just like hiking. Before you go hiking, you must tell someone else, not in your party, where you're going, how long you plan on being there, and when you expect to be back. So if a disaster happens, same thing. Have all that information ready. That'll be very beneficial. Let's see. And then for evacuation for your home, what are you supposed to be doing? You're supposed to practice it. So practice your plan. And for go bags, again, I'll just reiterate. So medications, list of medications, important documents, your deeds, your will, bank accounts, all these things. If you lose your phone, you're gonna be lost. So just remember that. And if you have, I think it was mentioned earlier, communication issues, yeah? So very important to be able to communicate with people. If there's a language barrier, try and find some translator or somehow to be able to communicate to each other. That's all I have for now, and they can ask us questions later.
Thank you. Okay. Major Soria. You have the mic. Oh, you need the podium. Oh, this is not, well, this is off the hospital. What is this?
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Okay, there we go.
So, thank you, Clem. Thank you, Natalia, for the invite. This was last minute to do a short presentation, so I put together something, how we, the police department, prepare for natural disasters. So in our district, we prepare for disasters through a combination of planning, training, coordination, and communication. So there's a few key ways in which our district typically prepares for disasters. The first is developing comprehensive disaster plans. Our District 4 MOPs consist of a detailed disaster response plan that outline our officers' roles, responsibilities, and procedures for various types of emergencies. These plans are regularly reviewed and updated to ensure that they are effective and relevant. Next is training and exercise. Our key officers undergo regular training and participate in simulated exercises to practice their response to different disaster scenarios. This is done through our MED, our Major Events Division, by holding ICS training classes. I believe most of you did through it, the ICS training classes. These hands-on training help them familiarize themselves with protocols, test communication systems, and improve coordination with other emergency response agencies. Next is our specialized disaster response teams. This is our SSD. Our specialized response team also consists of our K9 units and our bomb squad. They are trained to handle specific types of emergencies. These teams receive advanced training and equipment to respond effectively in high-risk scenarios. Next is technology and equipment. We've invested in advanced technology and equipment to enhance our disaster response capabilities, which include our communication systems, surveillance tools, drones, specialized vehicles that enable officers to gather information, coordinate their efforts, and respond quickly to emergencies. Next is collaboration with our agencies, other agencies. So our department works closely with other emergency response agencies such as fire, EMS, and local government officials, and soon to be the Kailua CERT, to coordinate our response to disasters. By establishing clear lines of communication and sharing resources, our agencies can work together seamlessly through all type of emergencies. Next is community engagement. Our community policing team are able to engage with the community to raise awareness about disaster preparedness and encourage residents to develop their own emergency plan. By strengthening relationships with the community, we can better support and protect the residents during a time of crisis. And lastly, continual evaluation and improvement. Our D4 commanders evaluate every disaster preparedness efforts through after-action reviews and debriefings. These ongoing evaluations help identify areas for improvement and allow our department to refine our response strategies to be more effective in future emergencies. So lastly, by taking a proactive and comprehensive approach to disaster preparedness, we are ready to respond effectively to any disaster that may occur in the Kailua community. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, apologize, 4, not District 7 here. Just notice that. We would have won. And that's a big area from Kuhuku all the way to Makapu Point. So, okay, so now we have Kailua Church of Nazareth. Okay. And I'm glad you folks here, because one of the things that Kailua Alert Prepared, we like to do outreach with faith-based organization like our partners, CCU.
Yes.
So we thank you. First of all, this is awesome. You guys are awesome. We're here to learn because it's not just our family at home anymore. We have a vulnerable family that's out there, and we need to be able to lead them, share with them where to go, what to do. So that's where we're at. We feed them and try and get them off the streets, but they're still out there, no matter what. And we want to be able to maybe be proactive. Reacting to these storms and to disasters would be a disaster for them. So we want to be able to reach out to them, warn them ahead of time, get them maybe to a central place where we can, if we lose communication, we can direct them, you know, uphill to Kailua High School or Kalaheo, wherever that is designated at that time. So it's a blessing to be here and what you guys do.
And I want to mention that I'm glad that the police department, they have an outreach, so they know where the homeless are. They know if they're where they are in the mountains, under the bridges. There's an outreach team that you have, right? Yes. So, you know, where they could go out there and with their bullhorn and call them down. A lot of them are stubborn, they don't want to leave. And also Marissa, because she in charge of the Wednesday night at the Church of the Nazarene. And so we've built a relationship with all of them, and it's important because they trust us. So if we tell them it's not safe, they will listen, most of them. And that's really important, to build a relationship with them. And like Roger said, we're not just out there feeding them, we're trying to get them off the street. We're trying to get them social services and things like that, so.
We appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions? We have 15 minutes for Q&A. Anybody?
I'm looking at the military component. If you got a PIO from maybe Cunningham Marine Corps Base or somewhere else where you can see their strengths that they can offer, maybe a MASH or whatever, but not like bringing people there. It's a low-lying area coming away. But you got trained people there that possibly could enhance or maybe back up. In San Diego, there was a fire years ago, and the base ended up taking the brunt of all of those exotic animals, you know, psychological issues and things like that. Base commander had to reach out.
Yeah, to answer your question, we do have a liaison with Marine Corps Base Hawaii. What's her name, Suzanne? She's head of the Jackie Freeland, yeah.
Oh.
She lives in Kailua, and she invited us to her EOC for a presentation. We have invited them to our preparedness fair, so they sent a representative. So we know that if we have an emergency, a local disaster like happened, Kawainui Marsh flooded, and one of our members was a survivor of that. They send their Amtrak out and help evacuate people. So it's the decision of the local commander that can do that. But their first primary mission is to safeguard, you know, military. First, safeguard America. So yeah, we have a liaison with her. So a good working relationship.
Well, the posturing for that is to take the brunt or to take the pressure off a home group fire. You know, if we could take a secondary role and keep them for the primaries and also rest, because they're going to need rehab.
Yeah.
Even the police officers. You know.
And there are CERT teams on the mainland that do rehab for the fire department.
Yeah.
Because they're sponsored by the fire department,
Yes.
activated by the fire department. And they're CERT identified for that department, especially in California. So there's a lot more information when you attend a CERT class. And some of these things were covered by the fire department, making a plan, etc. And the natural hazards that we cover and all that, preparedness, etc. And we teach in CERT, as a CERT instructor, disaster preparedness and individual responsibility. In a disaster, people point finger, right? There's three other finger pointing at you. why aren't you prepared for at least minimum 14 days of food and water? Okay, so CERT trained people that gone through CERT know what to do. They know what the hazards here, they know what they need to prepare. That's why we also prepare, and I'll be talking about ham classes, to get your ham license, because if you're dependent on the cell phone, if the cell goes out, you're stuck, right? You have other means of communication. CERT members, Kailua CERT members also have family radio service, FRS radio, as a means to inter-team communication, as well as amateur radio. But that's off on a tangent here, but it's a lot more. Any other questions? Yes?
Hi, I guess this is a question mainly directed at Jennifer. When you were talking about these centers of refuge, mostly what was mentioned were the public schools and recreation centers, which you have a difficulty scheduling, you know, what will be available when. I'm sure you've done this, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Contacting churches, which tend to have large sanctuaries that are quite stable buildings, and their schedules are usually pretty open. Just in doing our outreach work with Patty and Roger, I was trying to come up with a calendar with other churches of when they had these events, and I was in contact with over 80 churches on the Windward side. There must be places like that that would be available, not just the public schools.
Yes.
Or is this a silly question? I don't know.
No, it's not silly at
Good
all.
question.
So I think that that's where we need to start looking, because a lot of the, I'm just talking for the hurricane refuge areas, we've looked at most of like the preferred schools at this point, I would say. Like what's left is smaller elementary schools, which might not have even a cafeteria or a gymnasium. And so our hope would be, we're getting some additional grant funding if we can identify a facility that has, you know, an open space that's appropriate, that we could do that. The challenge is that a lot of the facilities that don't rate well are ones that have large open roof spans. And so that's why the classroom buildings are for the most part where in the schools that they've said stay here during a hurricane. But it's still good to know, because I talked about how I do worry about post-impact. So even if we say, you know what, this might not be something for hurricane refuge, could we do a shelter agreement with like Red Cross, where maybe they train their congregation or whatever else it is, because they're kind of our partner on doing the private sheltering side. It's really good to know, because we're gonna need all the help we can get.
I was blown away by how many churches there were on the Windward side, just getting in contact with everyone. And usually it's not just the large sanctuary, but there's, you know, supportive buildings as well, including classrooms.
Well, and we can be in conversation, because CCU right next door is looking at post-impact sheltering of vulnerable populations.
That would be great.
That would be a really helpful project, you know, for the CERT group. If in your community you had a list of what you thought might be potential shelters. I'm not asking you to even triage them by this or that, but kind of describe what's available. Because then as we have funding to do more assessments and it's in a priority area, we can kind of contact you, and a lot of times it's easy to make the introduction when someone in the community already knows, and we can kind of, whether we look at an assessment or we say, oh, this might be better for post-impact, and you know, here's an option for a shelter agreement with Red Cross, just because it provides some liability, or if you want to be a private shelter, that's okay too, but we could have that. So that would be helpful to get your input on potential sites.
I can give you my list. I was.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Like I said earlier, I'm glad that we have faith-based representative, because one of the missions of Kailua's Alert and Prepare CAP is to do outreach. And in a disaster, we need to have people willing to step forward to help, okay? Be volunteers for shelters. But after the response is the recovery, point of distribution. One of the things we're looking at is set up a point of distribution, and CCU initially it's a small site, as you know, but we've done not a point of distribution, but point of reception. Several years ago, pre-COVID, we had a collection point for the Marine-based Toys for Tots, and also food bag. So the part of distribution is issuing out water, ice, tarp, whatever, food. And the more we can get other faith-based organization with their congregations set up as pods, we can do that. And that's what they've done on Maui, the fire, where the community stepped up and did, hey, what can collect for our community members. They did the same thing in New York, Brooklyn, for Sandy. The community stepped up. Church, faith-based organizations stepped up to help their residents in their community. So this is what we're looking at to work with more faith-based, because we need your help. You know, Kailua CERT right now is about 25 people. That's all we have. We've been here for about 7 years, and we're still trying to build. Every year we're trying to build. People go, you know, say, I no longer want to get involved, whatever. But we need volunteers. Red Cross need volunteers. I hate to say this, but nationally, volunteerism has gone down. Organizations need help. So we need more people to volunteer. Kailua CERT, we've been here 7 years, and we only have 25 people. We're a community CERT group, okay? And we cover 50,000 people. Lanikai, Akai, Coconut Grove, in Channel Lake, Manawili, you know, Olomana over here. We cannot do it all. The bigger picture is to have community groups in Lanikai, Channel Lake, and Coconut Grove, Aikahi, whatever, Manawili, okay? And then we all work together under one roof. We help each other. The best we can right now is Waimanalo don't have a group, but Kaneohe Kalu has a small group, and we can help each other there. Haula has a small group. Laie has a small group. And we are on Windward side, and we are coastal communities. So we can help through amateur radio, because we're encouraging amateur radio. So, but anyway, any other questions? Yes?
Not so much a question, it's a comment. There are a lot of people who live by themselves,
Yes.
and some are elderly. And so, in a time of disaster, and of course it depends on the hazard, if it's a big island earthquake and it's a 7.6, then we may have 45 minutes. See, so our networks aren't there, you know, and even faith, you know, churches, do you know the people in your church? Are you connected with them so that in that time period when we're on our cell phones, et cetera, that, are you okay? But it really should be, I'm okay. You know, that each person who's wherever they're at reaches out and says, I'm okay, or I need help. See, so it is a community. It's building community consciousness that we have to be together, or we're gonna lose people.
The third concept is neighbors helping neighbors. You help yourself first and your family. Once you're okay, then you help your neighbors.
And just to build on what Ed said, I know personally, a lot of our senior church members in perfect health, these are not people with pre-existing conditions that would make them susceptible to COVID or RSV, are still scared to return to church because of COVID fears. And they're still staying at home. And we've tried to get people together to go visit them, see if they have food, are they getting exercise, are they getting to doctor's appointments? But that's almost a full-time job in and of itself.
Yes.
Yeah, the aging of the population in Hawaii, you know, I'm a senior citizen. I'm probably the oldest one of you all here. But, you know, I have aches and pains, take medication and all that, see the doctor regularly. But for CERT, Kailua CERT and CERT as a whole, there's a place for everybody. Okay? Even if you have trouble walking, we don't expect to assign you to the search and rescue. Okay? But you can do some admin, checking in people, checking out people, etc. So we encourage people because we teach preparedness and we do training at our monthly meetings. Not all our monthly meetings because we have presentations. Okay? So any other questions? Because
Real quick, just,
Yeah.
have you, the concept of map your neighborhood, you've heard of that?
yes,
Okay, so that would be ideal for your neighborhood, Just your neighbor in front and back, and that's it. You know, and you can work it from there, and they can go to the next.
Yeah, started in Oregon.
Yeah.
It basically, anybody belong to the Kailua, no, not Kailua Neighborhood Board, but, police, citizen, community police, not,
Neighborhood Watch?
no, I'm sorry?
Neighborhood Security Watch?
Yeah, Neighborhood Security Watch. Okay, Neighborhood Security Watch is a perfect organization where you're working against crime, criminals, but you know your neighbors. I've been trying to get them to be organized as a CERT, join a CERT group, because that way you know your member. But they tell me the members only interested in crime prevention. Okay, I used to be a coordinator for my community, my neighbor. Okay, but my interest has changed to more emergency management and preparedness. But that's something that HPD can encourage because they're already watching. Okay, taking care of the neighbors, watching neighbors. They have a network who they can call in their community, and to have them train in CERT is a perfect marriage. Okay, and that ties in with mapping your neighborhood because they know each other. In my area, I don't know, I know the neighbors around me, but I don't know all the neighbors because my community has been changing. We've been there for 50 years. So the people have gone, people have died, we got new families now. They're further up on the cul-de-sac, down below, whatever. But we used to have potluck where we get together. And you still can do that as part of a localized CERT organization. Get your neighbors to join CERT. Learn what to do and what not to do. Okay, anything else?
Real quick before we move on, I just want to mention that in the back I have a printout of the slides that I just did. If you want to know the bill number so you can track and follow them and testify, please. And then we also have, if you want to start building your emergency supply kit, I have a whole bunch of emergency water storage bottles. These were donated by the
Board of Water Supply.
They were donated by Board of Water Supply, but the lady at Lani Guli had a lot of extra, so she wanted me to share with everybody here.
Okay.
They're in the back.
Mark, last question.
Yeah, I'd like to say one more thing, and I really appreciate the first responders, police, fire, and everybody. They have families too, so when you see them during a problem, think that way too, that, you know, they may need help too. That's all.
Okay, with that, I really appreciate her taking CERT and joining Kailua CERT. She's been on outreach, and this is, we have over 40 people here. This is the most we've had in post-COVID.
I've been spreading the word.
Yeah. And she said she never get her CERT backpack. We give CERT backpack, you pass the CERT class, which is 3 weekends, and join Kailua CERT and active for at least a minimum of 3 meetings. So, and she has a yellow t-shirt in there too. So thank you very much for bringing everybody here.
We can direct our neighbors and friends to.
Dana, what you want to mention about the CAP website?
Our website is just Kailua Alert.
I have no idea.
Okay.
One more time?
KailuaAlertPrepared.org.
Okay. And with, in there has about Kailua Alerted Prepared and also Kailua CERT. Okay.
Clint?
Yes.
Can I say something? Okay, so I want to confess I work for the state. I'm in public health nursing. And thank you for the water bags. So I do want to emphasize at this time, some of you are nurses, but you know, 2017 when Hurricane Maria had hit Puerto Rico, almost immediately about 3,000 people died. Why? No water. A person can live without food between 5 to 21 days, on average about 2 weeks without food. Without water, 3 to 5 days. Why is that? Because your kidneys start shutting down. So you think about Lahaina, for instance, you think, okay, one person just recently said, well, I'll always have water. Because when people come into my clinics, I do share this information so they kind of wake up and they start working on self-preparedness. So to emphasize this, so you take this information I just shared with you and you start planning yourselves. Instead of only expecting people in the community to prepare, you start preparing yourself. And share the information I just did with you, so people will start waking up, all right? Thank you so much.
Okay, one of our members, Andy Singer,
I think the guests can all leave it.
yeah, guess you can leave, but you want to say, this is part of our training. And some of the things that Kailua CERT events are coming up that you may be interested about what Kailua CERT is doing. But Andy, he sent me an email about this training he went to